Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with therapist and health coach Shannon Swanson. She has been a therapist for 20 years, specializing in trauma and health coaching for women struggling with fear, limiting beliefs, and unworthiness, keeping them from living the life they truly want. She was raised in a strict Catholic family by an emotionally abusive mother and a father who didn't want her. She knows how past trauma can affect our future lives and the stories we tell ourselves. We get into all of this and quite a bit more. Enjoy the interview.
Thanks for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we get into your life as a therapist, I want to begin with what happened over the last couple of years. How did you survive COVID? How did you make it through that time period? And how has it subsequently changed you now that we're coming out of it?
Wow. I don't even know where to start with that. Well, I went into it, leaving my job of 20 years in mental health. And I guess I was at a point in my life where I'm incredibly spiritual. And so I didn't see it the way everyone did. I guess I just anchored myself in the belief of the bigger picture and trying to see what was really going on and the truth of it all. So I don't even know how to answer this question because there's so much to it. But I just... I shut myself off from a lot of what is out there in terms of the media because I think a lot of it is very skewed on all sides. And so I just anchor into my spirituality first and foremost. And that's what got me through it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So let's simplify your life and what you do on a daily basis, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day, and one of them looks up at you and says, "What do you do for a living?" How would you answer that question?
I would say that I take what I've learned in my life and my experiences, things that have been really hard, and I help other people find their way and learn that they can get through hard times too.
So let's go back no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, go ahead. No, it's fine.
Well, I was just going to say, that getting into therapy is pretty heavy. And I'm curious in your life, if we go back to your childhood and growing up, how did these seeds begin for you to make you want to do this? And what did you want to do when you were a child?
Interesting question. I honestly believe I've always been a social worker. So from the time I was little. So I've always had this innate desire or need to protect other people who were vulnerable, people who were marginalized. So when I was a child, I hated bullying and would always feel like I was a kid to defend and stand up for others who were struggling, having a hard time. And I really had a thing about cruelty. Like it just really on a visceral level always bothered me. And just this desire inside of me to help other people realize their power and to stand up for themselves and to protect and stand up for people who can't do it at the moment. And while helping them stand up for themselves, teach them how to do it for themselves. And so that was always my desire. And I always had an interest in psychology. And that's what I ended up majoring in, was psychology. I have a bachelor's in psychology. And through the twists and turns of my life, I ended up working in juvenile justice for a hot minute. And because I was also getting an associate's degree in criminal justice. And so I had to do this internship that was required. And they said, well, you don't want to be a police officer? No. Okay, well, you can do your internship at the juvenile detention center here, and you're either going to love it or hate it. I ended up loving it. I absolutely loved it, loved the kids. And so I was really focused because I wasn't really sure how I wanted to use my degree, but then I was really focused. And so I went on to work in a residential facility for juvenile boys who committed crimes and loved working with them. And moved on to getting my MSW and then working with younger children, ages 5 to 13. Well, I also worked with teenagers too, but yeah. But that's just this kind of common thread. And now with my health coaching business, it's the same thing I'm doing with women, is helping them realize their worth and to stand up for themselves and know who they are and know their power.
So as somebody that has to give a lot in your profession, how do you balance that? How do you pie chart that out where you take care of yourself, but you also give enough for others so that they can heal and thrive?
Really good question. I think, as a therapist, I worked in something called psychiatric day treatment. And so worked with children who had been removed from the public education system, who were on the verge of possibly going into residential, who had significant behavioral emotional issues, abused in every way you can possibly imagine, neglected. And a lot of the kids I worked with were in foster care. So saying that to paint the picture of the ugliness I've seen of what people have done to children and the horrors that I've heard and seen. And I don't know how to explain it. I think the desire to help and know that I'm giving back and that I'm sitting with a child and honoring their story and helping them see through it, the pain, is kind of, how do I say it? And I don't want to sound like I'm, all holy or something like that, but that's kind of what balances it out is knowing that I'm able to do something about it. It's one thing to hear horrible stories of things that have happened to people because you can kind of take on this kind of helplessness and feel that, like, I wish I could do something about it. So I think being in that position, knowing I was able to do something to help in some way helped. But I think it's, in terms of just coping with burnout, it's just a lot of self-care. And with the teams that we worked with, all of my colleagues, we were very close. You develop bonds, and it's laughing together and debriefing, talking things through, processing it, having each other's back. And outside of that, just a lot of self-care, taking care of yourself, finding things that you love to do that fill you up again, and nurturing your own relationships. And if you need, sometimes we go see our own therapist to process a lot of, especially if you're burned out, it's something that is necessary sometimes.
What's been the best client response you've ever gotten? One of your bigger success stories?
Oh, so good. I have two, but I'll say this one. So one of the kids I worked with at a residential facility for boys had committed some serious crimes. So I got to make this very, very general. And he was really difficult and had committed some serious crimes, and I was really hard on him. So the position I had at this residential facility was a counselor. I wasn't a therapist, but there were 4 of us, and there were 16 boys in the program, and our job was to help them through all of the treatment work that they had to do. And it was significant. And so I was just really hard on him, mainly because of the same reason, you don't have to make these choices. There's a way, and you can move through this. And there's, to kind of teach and say, you need to look at the side of things in terms of what your victims probably went through. And really, I guess I'm trying to find my words. One thing I will say is that, when you work with kids, they know when you care and they know when you're just there to do a job. And I actually really cared and really invested my time in working with this particular kid. Anyway, years later, actually, I would say 2 years ago. So that was, in the late 90s when I worked there. So I got a message from this particular client 2 years ago, thanking me for everything that I did for him, and that because of how I believed in him and how hard I was on him and the work that we did together, he now has the life that he has, and he has his family, and his life is what he always wished it could be.
So, dealing with all of these things that are traumatic and hard and processing it and putting your own level of therapeutic medicine on it, it has to be hard. But what consistently gives you optimism every day, gives you hope for what you do?
I would just say that there is good in people, and I think that nowadays with the social media and how divisive everything has become, I think that it's developing relations, like talking to people. I was just talking to someone about this morning, that if you isolate yourself and you turn on the television, you're going to get a completely different perspective of what's happening in the world, and that can become the story that you believe in, that everyone's horrible, everyone hates each other, everyone's at odds. But when you just take the time to talk to a human being, like at the grocery store or just randomly meet someone in public, what I find, and I'm assuming this is true for a lot of people, when you start to talk to people, you realize that we have more in common than we don't, and that we're all fighting a battle, and we're all struggling. And so I think when I worked with kids, to answer that question too, it's the courage to see these human beings work through all of their pain and come out on the other side, that anything is possible if you have people there to support you. But that's what gives me hope. It's seeing the growth. It's seeing these children believe in themselves again and have the self-esteem and know that this isn't the end of their story, that they're not, because most kids that came to us, like the first session I would have with kids, I would always ask this question, why do you think you're here? And they would literally 9 times out of 10 say, because I'm a bad kid. And so I just knew in that moment that this is the story that needed to shift. You are not your stories. You are not your experiences. You are not the things that have happened to you. You are a being that has suffered tremendous trauma and pain. And you need to understand that, yes, that experience is real, but it's not at the end of the day who you are as a human. And to help them shift that story. And they were able to. And so that's what gave me hope to just keep going, to be honest.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your clients, but you live your life. You have a perception of you. Who do you think you are?
I think, honestly, at the end of the day, I had a spiritual awakening. Oh, sorry for the background noise. I had a spiritual awakening in the last year. I was spiritual before that, but this was like the whole kit and caboodle, I guess, as you'd call it. And I would say what I've discovered at the end of the day, who I am is my soul. That's truly who I am at the end of the day. I'm not my body. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my feelings. I'm not my experiences. I am that. I am a soul having a human experience.
I like that. Shannon, if anyone out there wants to know more about you, hire you, clients, anybody out there, where's the best place for them to go?
I would say Instagram is a great place to go, and they can find me at Shannon E. Swanson, and my website is shannoneswanson.com.
Wonderful. Shannon, thank you for opening up. I really appreciate it. Good luck with everything. Have a great holiday and a great 2023.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, spirituality, business, and music from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.